Hello and welcome to pwrcycle's presentation on Monero. Monero is a privacy-focused cryptocurrency. There are other coins that are focused on other things like speed of transaction, other things focused on smart contracts. Monero is strictly, not exclusively, but primarily focused on privacy. It is also an open source project. It is on GitHub, maintained on GitHub. There is a Freenode channel, there's a Slack channel, but it is maintained by a community of developers. There is no one person who owns it. There's no corporation that owns it or backing it or anything like that. There are a few core developers who have commit rights on GitHub, but even these are basically community advocates themselves. Monero is based on the CryptoNote protocol, which is different than the Bitcoin protocol. There are a few changes basically in that you can have a separated confirmations and transactions. You have much more ability to add other cryptographic protocols into the overall algorithm. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of other crypto coins which have been based on the CryptoNote protocol. Monero is specifically a fork of Bytecoin, which was based on the CryptoNote protocol. It was founded in 2014. The founder originally called it BitMonero. He was not amicable in working with the community at large that really wanted a privacy-focused coin, and the project was actually forked away from him to be called Monero, and has been an open source project since then. So the key privacy features of Monero are this. One is ring signatures, which gives privacy to the sender. What this means is when you submit a transaction to the block, you actually submit multiple transactions. For instance, in one transaction, you might submit 6 transactions by taking the signatures of previous transactions and using those as your inputs. They will, however, be invalid, although no one will know that they are invalid because no one could even know that your signature is invalid. Only the receiver knows this. But by having multiple signatures in which you create a ring and submit that, it enables privacy for the sender. A ring confidential transaction does much the same thing for senders as it does for the amount, in that it obfuscates how much is being sent from one account to another. Even if you don't know which accounts are being sent to, you're continuing to add to the privacy by showing that the amount is not, it cannot be seen. The third item, and these are all very separate items, but the third item is stealth addresses, in which the sender is given the receiver's address, but then again submits fake transactions to other address in order to obfuscate who is receiving any transaction. Therefore, by these 3 steps, you protect the sender and the receiver and the metadata of the amount of the transaction. These 3 things are totally public on the Bitcoin blockchain. If you know anyone's account, you can look up every transaction that has ever taken place with that account, and then again every transaction that those secondary accounts have made, and then again third and fourth. Bitcoin is transparent. It's a feature, not necessarily a bad feature, but that is the way it is. Monero is specifically designed to give privacy where Bitcoin does not. Now, the fourth item concerns the metadata around how you submit a transaction to the blockchain. An enterprising eavesdropping evil third party could simply monitor IP addresses that submit transactions and then correlate data this way. What Monero developers are doing is working on total integration into I2P networking in order to hide the submitted IP addresses of transactions, giving almost no advantage to people trying to gather metadata and then work backwards to attack the other three implementations. So to explain a little bit about how it works in Bitcoin, as I'm showing here, transaction 1 happens. There are other transactions that may have happened in that block. But then later on, you have a transaction to 2, and then a transaction to 3, then a transaction to 4 and 5. If at some point transaction 1 and 2 were deemed to be illegal in a jurisdiction which you're in, but the person who receives the coin in transaction 4 does not know that, he may, possibly using his own Bitcoin wallet, receive the money and send the money with no issue. However, if transaction 4 were to go to somewhere like Coinbase, their AML, KYC obligations kick in, and in the past they have seized Bitcoin based upon this layout. Even though the person in transaction 4 had nothing to do with the transactions of 1 and 2, and even though transaction 5 had nothing to do with 4, 3, 2, or 1, he can have his Bitcoin seized, or at the very least put into a state where he can't access them by Coinbase or by anyone else that uses Coinbase on down the line in those transactions. In Monero, you cannot see which transactions were used. In all actuality, there are so many transactions and fake transactions that being able to tell which transaction is real is a very real problem. But even if you were to do that, you still have the very real problem of figuring out who the sender was, then figuring out who the receiver was. These are cryptographic additions that, as a feature of privacy, actually increase the blockchain. As you might expect, if you're submitting a transaction size that's 6 times larger than normal every time you make one transaction, your blockchain is going to grow bigger. Bitcoin doesn't have this, however. So the URL to get Monero is getmonero.org. There are lots of other domains that are out there, some of which are trying to be helpful, some of which are trying to be scams, but this is the official place to get the binaries for Windows, Mac, Linux, even ARM, if you want to use it on your Arduinos, some phones, BSD. You can also find the source code and a quick version of the blockchain that you can download without having to do the whole thing via the Monero network. It's kind of a jump starter to get you going. So if you're going to be installing the command line version of Monero, which I suggest you follow these steps, which are very simple. Get the build, untar it, run it, look at your logs. In looking at the wallet, which is separate than the Monero daemon itself, the daemon connects you to the network, Monero D. Once the local connection for you is set up, that's when you can set up a wallet. You run the program monero-wallet-cli. It will ask you if you have a local wallet already running or already saved in which to run. If not, it'll create a new one for you. Some of the simple commands that you run when you're inside the wallet are help to show all the commands, balance to show how much Monero is in this account, is in this wallet, show underscore transfers will show you previous transactions that have happened, whether incoming or outgoing. You can do a transfer by saying transfer, pasting in the address of the receiver, how much you want to send, and the payment ID, which is optional but highly recommended. And I'll take a moment to say this. The payment ID is highly recommended because the sender cannot, the receiver cannot see who the sender is. If the receiver receives a transaction, he receives an obfuscated sender's address. It's not there. Unless you have sent him some prearranged code or payment ID, or you have sent a specific amount, then the receiver has no way of knowing that it actually happened, which is even made more difficult because in the process of hiding the amount of transactions, Monero breaks down transactions into tens. So if you were to send 335 Monero, it may break that down into a 50 Monero transaction, a 50 Monero transaction, a 100 Monero transaction, a 10 Monero transaction, a 10 Monero transaction, and 2 5 Monero transactions. It breaks up large amounts and then sends them all differently as transactions to your wallet. On the receiver side, he may see many transactions that come in only for one source payment. The payment ID for those many transactions would be all the same, and it would be easy for the receiver to track. But without the payment ID, he doesn't know. Be careful about that. So, once you've got the Monero daemon running, and you've got a wallet connected to the daemon, if you wanted to then integrate it into some programming, into a website or something like that, you'd run the Monero RPC. It provides a JSON query, an HTML interface, which gives back JSON output, which can execute most of the commands that you can do from the command line, such as get balance, get height, get bulk payments, transfer. So one of the features of Monero, the primary feature of Monero, is privacy. No one can see when transactions can happen. However, there are some viable cases where you want someone to see that a transaction happened. For instance, an accountant, an auditor, a business partner. Maybe you have a remote server which needs to validate transactions, but you don't want to run the risk of losing money by having a usable transfer key. So Monero has a view key, which can be set on remote nodes, used as the wallet CLI key, and allows you to view transactions as they come in, and then take your action as you like. A bit about mining. Again, getmonero.org is the best place to start on this. There are several benchmark sites. The best and longest running is monerobenchmarks.info. That gives stats on how many hashes per second you can get from different CPUs. This is also for GPUs. So if you have something, not everything is listed, but at least you can get some idea of what the average is for those devices. A bit about the mining itself. Again, it is proof of work. There's no proof of stake at all. There's no plan to implement such. The block time targets are 2 minutes. The network dynamically adjusts the difficulty based upon the time that it takes to to find the latest block. It also dynamically changes the block size. So therefore, if blocks become found faster, difficulty goes up. If they're found slower, difficulty goes down. And this is done over a short time frame as opposed to a 7-day or 2-week time frame, which some other currencies do. There's also no hard limit on the number of Monero that will be issued. There is a diminishing tail in the number, but so long as people mine, there will be more Monero created. So I've explained the command line wallet a little bit. If you don't want to go all the way to that, there is a website called mymonero.com, which you can use to use a web wallet yourself. MyMonero is actually run by the lead maintainer of the Monero project, who's handled this fluffy pony. When you go to this website, it will ask you for the keywords, the seed for your wallet. If you don't have one, you can generate one at mymonero.com, and then you can monitor and do transactions from that website. Beware that if you lose that seed, you will not get it back. There is no recovery at all. This is by design. So, delving a little more deeper into the new things of Monero, this GUI is less than a year old, but it does work on multiple operating systems. So it does run on Mac, it does run on Windows, BSD, and Linux. Again, this GUI simply interfaces with the wallet that is on the back end and is doing the transactions for you just as if you were on the command line. So I mentioned Covery before, but this is a little bit about how the I2P network itself works. The green node is doing a transaction or wants to send some information, and imagine that there is a man in the middle. By using the I2P, what you're doing is encrypting for a certain number of hops and then decoding, seeing who the true destination is and sending that on. Therefore, by sending it to the first node, he has to send it out to other nodes. When those other nodes finally decrypt the packet and send it back on, as in TCP, it doesn't matter which packets arrive first. So packets can take different paths to the I2P Monero node, which may be running on the 3rd or 5th hop from the sender. And in this way, you're obscuring the metadata that you're obscuring the fact that he's even talking to a Monero node. Therefore, you can't use timestamps and IP information in order to track transactions. So the future of the project is Covery. That's the big one that people are really excited about as far as encryption. But also there's many other things on the table that are coming soon. Multi-sig transactions, sub-addresses, so that you can use different public wallet addresses to people and then have all of those inside the same address without having to have multiple accounts. There's also the concept of tokens. Even though there's been much to do about those lately, it's one of the things that's on the board. TLS and encryption authentication for the RPC server, which does not exist right now. You need to use most likely IP tables to protect those services. Decentralized trust and identity, additional privacy for Lightning Network transactions, and then plugins for the actual core GUI to give more functionality. these are even more of the concepts that are on the board for what Monero may do in the future. A lot of these are based upon ideas that other people pick up. As I said, this is an open source project. Um, but aside from the technical, there's still lots of other things that people can do if they want to get involved. There's translations. There is writing documentation. Many of the implementations and many of the commands are just not fully documented, or there have been updates since the documentation was committed and things need to be changed. It's an open source project, so anybody can participate. And these are the core team members right now. If you'd like, those are their email addresses. Send them a message. They actually respond. I suggest you drop in the Freenode channel. They are frequently in there, and you can ask questions directly to the people who are working on issues, the people who have solved the problems, and the people who are active in the community right now. So these are some links gathered together, which I suggest you check out. And these are some people that helped me put together this presentation and look up new information. So thank you very much.